Let's start our first process, which is plan schedule management, which happens in planning phase of the project. Let's get it done. All right. Look up there, guys. Schedule management in predictive projects. What phase? Planning phase. What process? The first process, plan schedule management. And welcome to mini terms. Let's have 6 mini terms that we need to know before getting to the plan schedule management process. The first one, development approach. I think you're familiar with that. Development approach is the chosen way the project will be executed. It's either predictive, agile or adaptive, or hybrid. And guys, most of the projects in real life are hybrid, okay? Because some parts of that project goes with a predictive approach and other parts goes with adaptive approach. And development approach is mostly chosen at the very beginning of the project. Why? Because everybody needs to know, okay, what's going on and how do we approach, for example, planning phase? Because schedule planning, for example, since we're in schedule planning in predictive projects is different from adaptive projects and hybrid projects, okay? That's why development approach and knowing our development approach is very important. And remember, guys, we don't use, for example, predictive approach for all our projects. No, tailoring, okay? We need to see, okay, is our requirements clear? If it's clear, go with predictive approach. If it's not, go with adaptive or hybrid approach. So many factors are important when selecting development approach for your project. The next term is rolling wave planning. What's rolling wave planning? It's planning the near-term work in detail while keeping future work high level until more information becomes available. Okay, that's why it is called rolling wave. Wave will become bigger over time. So, guys, we use rolling wave planning, the concept of rolling wave planning, when we know so many details about near work. For example, about next week's work, we know everything, all details. So we plan in details and complete for that next week's work. But for next month's work, we don't have that much detail. We need to wait until we get more information. So we apply rolling wave planning. We have detailed planning for the near-term work and high-level planning, not detailed, high-level planning for the future work. The next term is detailed upfront planning. I think it is self-explanatory, and we use detailed upfront planning in predictive projects. So detailed upfront planning means creating a full, detailed schedule at the beginning of the project when requirements, activities, and scope are clearly known. So guys, in predictive projects, when do we use predictive projects? When requirements of a project is clear. We know every aspect of that project. We use predictive projects. When we know everything about that project, every requirements and everything is clear, so we plan everything. We have a complete upfront and detailed in the very beginning of the project. We plan everything in details, and this happens in predictive projects. The next one is recognize, evaluate, respond to systems interaction. This is one of the principles that are mentioned in PM Box 7th edition. So guys, we know system interaction, okay? A change in one part of the project, one piece of the project, affects other pieces of the project too. So recognize, evaluate, respond to system interaction means understanding how different project elements or parts or pieces like scope, schedule, risk, stakeholders, cost influence each other and adjusting plans accordingly. When something changes, you need to change all those plans, okay? So for example, when a resource is gone, we have less number of resources, so our schedule plan will be affected because now it will take more time because we have less number of resources, okay? So we need to adjust and update our schedule plans. This is system interaction. You need to recognize, evaluate, and respond to system interaction. And respond here means updating that documents. The next term, control threshold. What's control threshold, guys? We have control threshold concept in schedule, in cost, in quality parts of the project. So a control threshold is a preset limit or tolerance. For example, plus minus 10%. Okay, plus minus 10% deviation from the baseline. This is our control threshold. That tells the PM when the schedule variances become serious enough that it must be investigated or corrected. Guys, for example, one work's timeline is 100 days. We need to complete that work in 100 days, okay? We know, and in schedule management plan, which is how-to guide for a schedule, we go and check control threshold for this work. It says plus minus 10%. Now, if that work, okay, is completed in, for example, 109 days or 110 days, that's fine. It is acceptable. But if that work, okay, is completed or not completed in 110 days, it's the original plan says 100 days, but control threshold adds plus 10 days. We're saying if it is completed in 110 days, it's okay, okay? We're accepting it. But if it passes 110 days, it is not acceptable, okay? It is out of our control threshold. It's bad, dangerous, signals major issue in our project. So control threshold is our limit or like tolerance of the stakeholders and the project. The next term is stakeholder expectations. I think it's clear too. Stakeholder expectations describe what stakeholders expect about the project schedule. We're tailoring these concepts to the schedule part of the project, guys. So, stakeholder expectations means, so what do stakeholders need about project's schedule? For example, deadlines. For example, reporting frequency, acceptable delays, level of detail in timelines, and how quickly they want updates when the schedule changes. These are stakeholder expectations for schedule part of the project. Awesome. We learned 6 good terms and mini terms for plan schedule management process. Now let's get into mini goals of this process. Let's get it done. All right, mini goal of plan schedule management. What's our purpose by doing this process, guys? PM and the team will decide how activities will be defined, sequenced, estimated, and scheduled throughout the project. What's activities, guys? Those small tasks that we do, or our project team do, are called activities, okay? In this process, we're going to prepare how-to guide for schedule part of the project, okay? How we define those activities, how we sequence those activities. By sequence means how we put those activities in a right order of performing them, how we estimate each activity, how long will each activity take, okay? What approaches we use to estimate that activity. Okay, this process answers to all of these how-to questions. We also, in this process, define how schedule performance will be measured, how schedule performance will be updated and reported to our stakeholders. So all how-to concerns and questions and instructions related to schedule part of the project will be decided in this process, okay? We decide, for example, what approaches we use to sequence activities, what approaches we use to estimate activities. Everything on schedule part of the project will be decided now, okay? And remember, guys, when we say we will decide on how to, it doesn't mean that we will go and, for example, sequence activities right now or estimate activities right now. No, we decide what approaches, what methodologies or tools and techniques we need to use to, for example, sequence activities or estimate activities. So it's how-to thing. Now, as always, we're gonna have inputs. So PM and the team extract the necessary information from some of the relevant existing docs, artifacts, and conditions, which we call them what? Inputs. Awesome. What are the inputs of plan schedule management process? Project charter, which has been created in initiating phase. Scope management plan, which has been created in what part? In plan scope management process, then EEF, OPA, and development approach. These are inputs of this process. Then to analyze, interpret, and transform those info to insights, we apply the right tools, techniques, or methods. What tools and techniques we use to do and perform plan schedule management process? Expert judgment, meeting, alternative analysis. And I think it is obvious, guys, that when we are dealing with planning part of the project, we need lots of meetings and discussions to decide on the foundational how-to instructions and guides, okay? And ultimately, PM and the team create and or update artifacts, deliverables, which we call them outputs. And output of this process is schedule management plan, or how-to guide when dealing with schedule. So basically, we perform this process to create a document called schedule management plan. Now, let's get into inputs and how those mentioned inputs helps us in this process. All right, let's start our mini lessons of plan and schedule management process with inputs. The first inputs, as always, charter. Guys, you may be wondering, okay, why charter is input to almost every process? Because charter is one of the first documents that we create in every project, and it includes high-level, very important information like high-level goals and deliverables, high-level budget, high-level deadlines, high-level stakeholders, those decision makers, high-level risks. So it includes high-level information for every those 9+1 pieces of the project. That's why charter is very important input, especially for those processes that happen in planning phase of the project. Now, let's see how charter helps us in plan schedule management process. Let's elaborate with an example. For example, charter says that the high level deadline, so the project needs to be finished by, let's say, 2029 or 2030. Okay, this statement is mentioned in the charter. So what's the goal of this process? Creating a document called schedule management plan. That document has different sections. One of the sections that document has is constraints. Okay, in that constraints, we mentioned that, for example, the project needs to be done by 2029. So every scheduled activities need to consider this constraint and this assumption when doing like schedule related activities. Okay, this is how project charter helps us. Or project charter also mentions that the Ministry of Health is the main decision maker. So how this statement helps us fill out a section in schedule management plan, we go and fill up the section called who approves schedule plans, for example. We have this section in a schedule management plan. Okay, in that section, we write down that Ministry of Health, which is our sponsor, needs to approve all schedule related plans. By extracting information from the charter, we fill out 2 sections of schedule management plan. This is how charter helped us in this process. The next document or input is project management plan. We know project management plan includes almost 20 documents. Okay, all of those X management plans, which is how to guide for those X, and development approach is also included in the project management plan, and those 3 baselines. So we open up project management plan. We go to a section called development approach. Okay, development approach means what approach we use to execute the project. Is it predictive or adaptive or hybrid? Okay, it is mentioned in the project management plan, and this is an input. Okay, we have this information. If in the project management plan it is mentioned that the development approach is predictive, for example, we need to come up with detailed and comprehensive schedule management plan. The goal of this process is creating a schedule management plan. If the development approach is predictive, that schedule management plan needs to be detailed and complete. But if the development approach is adaptive, for example, that schedule management plan needs to be just lightweight, not fully detailed and comprehensive. This is how development approach, which is part of project management plan, helps us as an input. And the next one is EEF and OPA. We know what's EEF and OPA, guys. EF are those external conditions and facts that limits our projects, and OPA are those internal documents, templates, registers, technologies that help us in the project. So let's elaborate with an example how EEF helps us as an input in plan schedule management process. For example, EEF says winter construction is restricted due to heavy snowfall. So we have this information from EEF, okay? Now we add this statement to the constraint part of the schedule management plan. And when planning for schedule, we need to consider all of these constraints that are added in a schedule management plan. how OPA helps us. For example, in our organization's repository, we have schedule management plan template from previous projects. We can use that template and tailor that template to our project. This is how OPA helps us. Or we have past hospital project calendars, or we have lessons learned, for example, saying avoid aggressive timelines for structural inspections. Okay, this is lessons learned from previous projects. We can use this. We can add it to assumptions or constraints part of the schedule management plan. This is how EEF and OPA helped us as an input. And remember, guys, tailoring to context. Okay, this is just a limited list of inputs. Your project is different project. You need to tailor and use those plans, documents, processes that fit your project's complexity and size. Now, let's get into TTs and see how different tools and techniques helps us in plan and schedule management process. Let's get it done. All right, let's continue our mini lessons with tools and techniques of plan schedule management. And you know what, guys? We have same list of tools and techniques that we use for plan scope management. Why? Because planning involves meetings, involves lots of discussions, consulting experts, selecting best option between available options. That's why tools and techniques are almost same when we are planning for different pieces of the project. The first one, expert judgment. Using experienced specialists to guide how the schedule should be planned. Okay, we go and consult expert, the one who already done the project, and that expert may say, hey, use, for example, Microsoft Project as your scheduling tool. We get this advice, we open up a schedule management plan and go to the section called scheduling tools. Now we move that advice that we gathered from expert to that section of a schedule management plan. That's how expert judgment helps us feel different parts of the schedule management plan, which is output of this process. The next one is alternative analysis, guys. Alternative analysis, we had it before. It means comparing different scheduling options. I'm going to tailor alternative analysis to schedule, okay? Comparing different scheduling options to choose the most effective approach, okay? When you're dealing with a schedule, for example, a scheduling tool, there are lots of different tools that you can use for schedule, different softwares, okay? You apply alternative analysis. You have different options. Now, each option will have pros and cons, okay? You go and check pros and cons of each of options and then pick the option that is the most efficient options that fits your project. This is called alternative analysis. And please feel free to read that example because I'm going to save time because we had these descriptions and tools and techniques before. And the last one is meeting. Meeting means discussions with the stakeholders and team members to shape the scheduling approach, to decide on how-to approaches for different parts of the schedule. For example, during a planning meeting, ministry may ask for monthly schedule reports. Okay, contractor requests a 2-week look-ahead plan, or IT team requests rolling wave planning. Okay, these are information we gathered from meetings. Okay, you as a PM, you need to put these information into, for example, scheduling reporting format and frequency, or scheduling detail level part and section of the schedule management plan. Now, as you may see, each of inputs and tools and techniques we covered helped us fill different sections of a schedule management plan, which is the goal of this process. Awesome. Now it is time to get into the output of plan schedule management. Let's get it done. Awesome. Let's continue our mini lessons. Look up there, guys. Schedule management in predictive projects. What phase? Planning phase. What process? The first one, plan schedule management process. And we are in outputs. So we reviewed all of those inputs. We applied 3 different tools and techniques to create one document. And that document is how-to guide for schedule, or so-called schedule management plan. Okay. So far, in scope part of the project, in plan scope management, we created a scope management plan and a requirements management plan. And now it is time to create schedule management plan. So it's a how-to guide explaining how the project schedule will be planned, developed, updated, managed, controlled, monitored. So any how-to question and concern you have about schedule, you need to go and review schedule management plan. So a schedule management plan could be 2-page document or 5 pages or 10 pages. We don't care, guys. It depends on project size and complexity. All we care is the different sections of schedule management plan. So a typical schedule management plan for a common project, common predictive project, could have these sections. Section 1 is purpose. Okay, why do we have this plan? We have it to define how the project schedule will be developed, monitored, and controlled throughout the project. And the next section is units of measure. So how many hours is each working day? For example, 8 hours. How many days we work in each week? 5 days, for example. Okay, we decide on these numbers and units. Okay, we keep them in the schedule management plan. So everyone, every decision maker has access to it. So when assigning tasks, we know that we can't assign more than 8 hours a day to each employee. Okay, everybody needs to see these numbers and units of measures. The next section could be scheduling methodology. Okay, what methods or approaches or softwares we use to, for example, sequence activities, to put activities in a right order. We use CPM or critical path method. By the way, you're going to see CPM. It's a cool method. We're going to cover it. Don't worry. But the method, the approach, the softwares are all mentioned in a schedule management plan. The next section could be activity list source. Okay, where do we find those activities that we need to define or we need to sequence, estimate? We find these activities by breaking down work packages, for example. This is mentioned on how to get those activities. The next section could be sequencing approach. We use, for example, FS or SS or other approaches. All of these are covered in sequence processes, okay? Don't worry. And what's estimation technique? For example, we use analogous estimating or 3-point estimating to estimate duration of each activity. What's schedule change process? All the schedule changes must go through integrated change control process. So all schedule related changes need to go through formal channels. How do we track schedule performances? For example, we use approaches called SV or SPI. As you can see, all of these softwares, approaches, methods, techniques, everything that we use to deal with different parts of schedule is mentioned in a schedule management plan, and everybody has access to this document. So everybody use same approaches, for example, to sequence activities or to estimate activities. Okay, one team does not use approach A and the other team approach B. No, everybody use same approaches because everyone needs to be aligned. Okay, and guys, all of these technical terms that are mentioned, for example, CPM, SV, SPI, FS, SF, we will cover everything related to schedule. So no worries at all. Okay, awesome. And this was the output of plan schedule management process. But let's have our first mini question for this process. Let's get it done. Mini question. You are a project manager leading a project where stakeholders disagree on how often the schedule should be updated, what forecasting method to use, and who must approve schedule changes. The sponsor also asked for clear guidance on bi-weekly forecasting because vendors will soon rely on schedule-linked contract terms. You already have a high-level timeline, but without aligned expectations, you risk rework and conflicting reports. What should you do next? A. Review the project charter and extract key milestones to update the high-level schedule before involving stakeholders. B. Conduct a working session with the team to detail out activity sequences and durations so you can produce a baseline schedule. C. Develop or refine the schedule management plan to define update frequency, control thresholds, forecasting methods, and stakeholders' expectations. And D, perform a detailed stakeholder analysis to understand their individual reporting preferences and update cadence before taking further action. That's a good question, guys. I want you to answer it under 30 seconds. Schedule changes. I think it rings a bell. The question is looking for a how-to guide for what part of the project? Schedule, because concerns are schedule-related concerns, okay? Who should approve a schedule? Where do we find that information? In schedule management plan. What methods or forecasting we use? Those technical terms, SPI, SV, those are forecasting methods that we're going to cover in future processes. Where are they located? In a schedule management plan. Any concern you have about schedule, any question you have as a PM, as a team member, is provided in schedule management plan. Okay, that's why the option C is correct. Develop or refine. If you already have the schedule management plan, you have to refine. If you don't have a schedule management plan, you develop. Okay, develop or refine the schedule management plan to define update frequency, control thresholds, forecasting methods, or stakeholders' expectations. See, let's go to the last two lines. Without aligned expectations, you risk rework. Every team member, every decision maker needs to be aligned. Everybody needs to have access to one single how-to guide related to schedule, because we're talking about schedule here. Why? Because one instruction, one manual will align everyone. Everybody will know, okay, this is the forecasting method to use. These are the softwares. These are the frequency of reports. Everybody will be aligned. Now let's read the description. The schedule management plan is where you define how the schedule will be developed, updated, managed, and controlled. It's a how-to guide. The scenario explicitly shows misaligned expectations. Okay, there's a disagreement on update frequency, on forecasting methods, on who approves what. Misalignment. Nobody knows. Okay, you need a document to align everybody, and that document is a schedule management plan. The scenario, and then the sponsor asked for forecasting and control clarity, exactly what the schedule management plan defines. Before producing or refining the schedule itself, you need the methodology and rules agreed upon. Okay, now let's go to why other options are incorrect. Let's go to option A. It says review the project charter and extract key milestones. You already have high-level timeline of the project. Key milestones won't align stakeholders, won't resolve these conflicts. Okay, the charter includes milestones but does not define schedule governance, update frequency, or forecasting methodology. These little schedule-related things are not mentioned in charter. Okay, charter includes only high-level information, and for the schedule part of the project, it includes, for example, the duration of project, the whole project, not small activities, or big milestones, like, for example, by end of Q3, we need to complete, for example, 50% of the project. These are mentioned, high-level information are mentioned in charter. So charter won't help us here to align these stakeholders and resolve that disagreement. Option B says conduct a working session, nice, with the team to detail out activity sequences and durations, so you can produce a baseline schedule. Guys, question is not asking us to produce a schedule. Question is not asking us to sequence activities or estimate durations. No, the question is simply saying, hey, there is a misalignment, there is disagreement on how-to scenarios, how-to cases. Okay, you need a foundational document first, and then we go sequence activities, estimate durations, develop schedules. All of these happen after having a good foundation. That good foundation is a schedule management plan. Option D says perform a detailed stakeholder analysis to understand their individual reporting preferences and update cadence before taking further action. Guys, this option is a nice option, but it is only focusing on update frequencies. Okay, there are other concerns too. What about forecasting methods? What about the other issue that we have? Let's see, What was the other issue? Forecasting method. And who must approve a schedule changes? Okay. Option D only talked about that updating frequency. We need an option to cover all of those concerns. So option D does not replace the need for a formal schedule management plan that defines the actual methodology and controls. Awesome. This was a very, very good question. And guess what? You know who's waiting for you? Mini FAQs. Let's get them done. Look up there, guys. Schedule management in predictive projects. What phase? Planning phase. What process? The first one, plan schedule management. And if there are still some remaining concerns and questions about this process, we're going to resolve them all together here in this mini FAQs. Question number 1, does the scope management plan get prepared before the schedule management plan? Not necessarily, guys. Okay, so the scope management plan and schedule management plan are both subsidiary plans of project management plan. We know that, and they may be developed in parallel. One team develops, for example, a scope management plan, the other team schedule management plan. However, in real life, in practice, okay, project managers usually draft the scope management plan first. Why? Because the schedule often depends on scope definition. Okay, but PMBOK, which is our main reference point, PMBOK itself does not mandate this sequence. Okay, you don't have to go with the scope management plan first and then definitely like schedule management plan. No, there's no mandation here. It's not mandatory, but it is recommended that we do scope planning first and then schedule planning and then cost planning and etc. Because the schedule and cost depends on the scope. Question number 2, can we update the schedule management plan during the project? Yes, of course. But under what condition? If the project management approach changes significantly. For example, instead of predictive approach, mid-project, a PMO or sponsor says us, hey, go with agile or hybrid approach. So schedule management in hybrid approach is different from predictive approach. We need to make some changes to our foundational how-to guides like a schedule management plan. Okay. Or if forecasting method changes, our sponsor says, hey, instead of this earned value management, use something else as forecasting, or instead of this software, use this new software. If these foundational how-to guides changes, these foundational softwares that we do, methods we use for schedule related concerns, if these changes, we need to update the schedule management plan. But normally, in big projects, it is stable once it is approved. Okay, we don't change that much. Question number 3, why can't we just jump into developing the schedule instead of creating schedule management plan first? Why waste time and create these how-to guide? Why don't we just go and develop a schedule? Good question. Because without a schedule management plan, different team members might use different tools, different levels of detail, or different reporting formats, leading to inconsistency and confusion. Okay, we need everyone to be aligned, everyone to use the same software, same tools and techniques, same formulas, same reporting, same templates, same everything related to schedule, cost, scope. Here, since we're talking about schedule, everybody needs to be aligned on using the same thing when dealing with the schedule. That's why we need a good foundational document, so it removes inconsistency and confusion. Question number 4, does every project, even small ones, need a schedule management plan? Yes, but the level of detail can vary. For a small project, it may be 1 page. For a large hospital project, it may be 20 plus pages. For adaptive project, you may not need schedule management plan. It really depends on your project size, complexity, how requirements are clear, dozen factors, okay? And we always mention the term tailor to context. We tailor our plans, processes, documents to fit our project. Question number 5, how does the development approach, predictive versus agile versus hybrid, change the schedule management plan? Guys, in predictive, we need detailed upfront planning because requirements are clear, so we can have lots of planning. We can do lots of planning. In agile, we use rolling wave planning. Okay, we have details for near-term work, and for future works, we do high-level planning. And for hybrid, we use mix of these two, mix of detailed upfront planning and rolling wave planning. Okay, the plan must be tailored to match the chosen approach. Question number 6, what should a project manager do when adopting new forecasting method? The project manager should update what? Schedule management plan and communicate the changes to stakeholders to maintain clarity, alignment, and trust. By forecasting method, I mean we forecast, we predict how project's schedule will be doing in 3 months. We use a method to predict that. Okay, let's say this method is changed mid-project. Okay, sponsor says us, or we decide to choose another method. So we update where? Schedule management plan. So by updating that, everybody knows that from now on, we're going to use new method, technique, new software. And then when we update schedule management plan, we need to let everybody know about this update. Okay, it shouldn't be just hidden. You should be transparent and clear to stakeholders, to those that this forecasting, this update affect them. Okay, awesome. Now it is time to get into mini summaries of plan, schedule management process. Let's get them done together. All right. Schedule management in predictive projects, planning phase and plan schedule management process. And we are in mini summary. Let's summarize everything in less than 3 minutes, hopefully. Let's get it done. So what did we do, guys? PM and the team decided how activities would be defined, sequenced, estimated, and scheduled throughout the project. We decided on forecasting tools. We decided on softwares, on performance tracking tools. We decided on foundational how-to concerns that we will have about the project schedule. Where did we start from? We extracted related information from existing docs, which we call them inputs, like charter, development approach, scope management plan, OPA, EEF, and then we asked experts' opinion and used meetings and alternative analysis to create that output, to create that how-to guide. We know what's expert judgment is, we know what meetings is, and alternative analysis is a technique that we use to compare different options or approaches to find the best solutions. For example, for forecasting purposes, we have different options, different softwares. Each software has their own pros and cons. We evaluate these options and use alternative analysis to pick the best option. We use alternative analysis in planning to choose the most efficient or feasible method. And then as a result of reviewing inputs and applying tools and techniques, we created one document, how-to guide for schedule, which we call it schedule management plan. It sets guidelines such as which scheduling tool will be used, what level of detail each activity should have, how duration will be estimated, how activities will be sequenced, how we track schedule. Every how-to guide is mentioned in this document, which is schedule management plan. And while doing this process with your team and having a coffee, you as a PM, you are applying one principle, guys. What's that principle? You apply different principles, but one of them is the most important one. That's tailoring to context, guys. Okay, because every project's schedule needs a different approach. For example, building a hospital is not similar as building a mobile app. So scheduling tools or plans we use for hospital is different from software project. That's why you as a project manager and your team, you always need to tailor to context. Awesome. This was a very good mini summary. We just finished the first process of the schedule, and congratulations to you. Okay, we will get it done together. Please smile. Have a high level of confidence because you will be PMP certified very, very soon. Let's get into the next process of schedule.